Well, welcome back to Your Horse Virtually Live. We've been listening to Carl Hester for the last 20 or 30 minutes about your questions that you've been asking him. And a lot of those are to do with lockdown, a lot of them to do with his favourite memories. But I think what we'll do here is we'll just start again. Carl, first of all, welcome back.
Thank you.
Tracy Barnett from Worcestershire asks, not that it would ever be the case, if you weren't involved in horses, what would you have liked to do as an alternative career? I think that's a great question, because being brought up in a non-horsey family, that could have very easily been the case.
It could, yes. You know, when I was brought up on Sark, my father was a carpenter there, and he very much wanted me to do something like that. That was never going to happen. So they sent me to school, boarding school in Guernsey. And I just, you know, I don't know where my passion comes from for horses, but there are horses obviously on Sark. They're working horses though, they pull carriages, and I was worked in tourism basically for a hotel, and I used to drive the horse and carriages in the day, picking people up from the boat and taking them to the hotel, and then I would run the bar at night, which I loved actually, and I think you know, it's actually a lot harder than you think, front of house or in hotels. And I mean, they were long hours, but they were fun hours, and you met a lot of people. And I thought it was a great way of, you know, like earning money when I was younger. And I think if I had stayed there, I would have continued to work in tourism over there, and certainly in the hotel trade.
Wow. I mean, that is a completely different career change, but obviously that's what the one that you knew and the one that you were involved in. So that was possibly the natural progression.
Yeah, and you know, the thing is with Sark, the island I come from, it is, or at that time, it was purely a seasonal island. So we used to rely on tourists coming to the island between the months of sort of April and October. And then it virtually would go into, you know, a lockdown for the winter period, and people would, you know, either work there on the land or fishing. Excuse me. And yeah, I just loved it. I loved being there, and it's a place I still visit now. And anybody that hasn't visited Sark in the Channel Islands, they should go and look, because it's still amazing today. There are no cars. You know, we used to go everywhere on foot or by bikes, and it's a very, very lovely, idyllic island.
You're selling it well. You'd have been very good at that job.
I should have. Yeah, I always say to them, surely I could have had the job as ambassador for going and selling Sark, because I mean, there is nothing bad to say about it, really.
Naomi Albrecht from Hampshire asks, what do you look for in a young horse when choosing a future dressage star? It's a difficult question, I know, but can you give us some insight?
Yeah, it is difficult, and it's difficult because it depends on what age you're thinking of buying a young horse. So, for instance, you know, I would be as lost as anybody else looking at a foal. You know, all foals are cute. You know, they often have a good shape as a foal, and their shape changes so much between obviously being a foal and 4 years old, for instance. So I tend to try and at least, you know, like Nip Tuck was a yearling, and I bought some yearlings at that time. But I think my favourite age to buy, and the safest age to buy, is 2.5 years old. 2.5, you can actually see, you know, the shape of the horse better. Their movement has to be natural, and I think that's important. I mean, don't forget, if you go and look at young horses, they're not ridden. You're only able to see these horses loose, you know, moving loose. So somebody probably turned them in an indoor school for you, or an outdoor school, or you'll see them in a field. So I think if you do that and you buy a horse that isn't ridden, and you need to look at 3 good paces, which you're going to need for dressage: the walk, the trot, and the canter. You know, make sure you see the horse in a relaxed state. Don't see it in a tense, crazy state, because, you know, horses, that can be very normal movers will often show themselves off to be these hugely extravagant movements, especially if they've been locked in and they're a bit fresh and they're running around the school because they're excited, and you think, wow, look at that move. And then you get at home and you get on it and you're like, where did all that movement go? There wasn't any. It was all tension. So I think when you look at a horse, make sure you look at it in a relaxed state, even tired, see how it walk, trot and canters when it's completely chilled out. The shape, of course, for dressage, you want the uphill frame. Bear in mind that at that age as well, the horse might be a little bit up behind, croup high. That can change as they get to 4 years old, the front comes back up. I think eyes are very important on a horse, like big eyes, kind eyes. There are several things you can't tell, which you really have to cross your fingers here, and this is the word temperament. You don't know what that horse is going to be like when you get on it. You don't know, is he going to be a real worker? You don't know if he has the heart to really do the big job, the Grand Prix, for instance, in our case. And you don't know how trainable they are. But that is the risk that you take, because you will be paying far less money if you buy a 2.5-year-old because it's not ridden. So, when they're ridden and everyone can see how fantastic they are and how workable they are, of course, you're moving to a different price bracket. So that's why in the past, we've always felt that buying, 2.5-year-olds was probably a better option, because they're cheap. Not all of them, of course, but they're cheaper. And, then you're minimizing your risks if the horse, didn't stay sound or wasn't mentally up for the job, or maybe just doesn't want to be a dressage horse and wanted to be an event horse. I've had 2 very, very nicely bred dressage horses that are now actually eventing because I didn't think that they enjoyed doing the job enough. So they're eventing very successfully. And so that's, I think that's interesting. I wouldn't make a horse do it if it didn't want to. I don't think that works. You don't get the best out of them, so you might have to think of an alternative career. But that, of course, doesn't mean they're worthless. So, I think you just have to look at it like that. But for me to go and buy it, I bought enough 2.5-year-olds now. I can walk in, I look at the shape, I watch the horse's hind legs when it moves. Is its power coming from behind, or is it pulling itself along from the front? And I have to make a quick decision like that. And, it might be flighty at 2.5, but maybe he's not been handled. It doesn't mean he has a bad temperament. So just because the horse appears a bit like a police horse doesn't mean that that's going to be an ideal dressage horse. Sometimes these they can be very nervous when they're young, but maybe it's the breeding, maybe it's the way they've been handled, but it doesn't mean that they won't turn out to be great horses. So if I was now looking at a horse that was ridden, the basic thing, all I would say to anybody is make sure you test the horse for reactions. When you get on a horse and you try it, if you touch it with your leg, is he sensitive enough to want to go forward? And if you touched him with a whip, for instance, would he naturally bring his hind legs forward and under? Or does he not bother about things like that? Those are all things to suit your personality, because of course not everybody wants a very sensitive horse that might make them feel nervous. They might feel safer with a horse that, has less reactions. So, I think it's all very well me saying what I would look for, but I do think it's very important that you buy what suits you and what suits your temperament. If you're laid back, you might want a horse that's more motivated. If you're very highly strung, you might want a horse that's a little bit quieter.
And also in the same breath, and you talked about buying horses that didn't quite make the grades or have what you were looking for your game, for dressage, that went on to do eventing, but be able to accept that mistakes in buying young horses happens.
Yes, they do. And I mean, the older you get, the more you realize if it doesn't, just because, you bought it, you don't have to do this. You don't have to make the horse do it if he doesn't want to. And you don't have to force yourself to ride a horse that you're not enjoying. You would be far better to let someone else who enjoys it have it. And that has happened. Of course, we have had horses as well here, as I've just explained, that I didn't feel were enjoying it. So I let them go and do something they did enjoy. People don't hear about that. They might just see the nip tuck getting to Grand Prix and think that every horse that we have becomes a superstar. They don't. So yeah, don't feel bad if you don't match with your horse.
Yeah, great bit of advice. Catherine Burrows from Cumbria, you talk about your 2.5-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, whatever you're looking at. Do they come to you already backed? Have you got a chain of system that
Yeah.
you have in place? I know that I used to, as in fact, it's where I met Charlotte, was breaking horses for you.
I think they broke you, didn't they? Actually, from what I remember.
A couple did, yeah.
Too many falls. I remember coming back once and finding you with your foot bandaged up. But yes, I don't break them in anymore. I mean, we did used to do our own years ago. Now I send them to Rob Barker, who is he's done events and dressage, very good with young horses. Rob will break them in, and like for instance, my 3-year-old is there at the moment. He's there for 6 weeks, so he's 3 years old. Come in, he's been in the field 2 years, and he'll be broken now for 6 weeks. That way, I know is his temperament good. He's walk, trotting, cantering off the lunge, and then he will come back home and he will be turned out again until the spring of next year. So that if everything goes well, that's how I like to do it. 6 weeks in the autumn if they're 3 years old, so they get a little bit of a feeling for the yard. We know what they're like. Some of them might need a little bit longer. Of course, 6 weeks isn't rigid. Some of them might be ready to go back out after 4 weeks, and some might have to stay an extra couple of weeks. But you know, they're not also at 3.5. They're not that strong. So on one hand, also you don't want to ride them too much, but on the other hand, they often aren't going to cause you any problems at that age because they aren't really strong enough. So that's how I do it at the moment, and that works very well. I think that hacking and going around the farm and things is far more important than being schooled, certainly at 3 years old. So yes, they have to be safe, walk, trot, canter in the school, so you know you can steer and stop, and then they do a little bit of hacking, and then they come back next year for schooling.
It's an important time in a young horse's career as well to get those fundamental parts of the building block in place.
Very important. I mean, so much can either make or break their futures at this age. You know, good experiences, very important, so that they go, when they do go back out, they're going back out chilled, and they will be ready to come in and basically pick up from where they left off. You don't have to re-break them. If this has all gone well at this stage, they will be ready to come back in next year, and for us just to lunge them a couple of days and then crack on. But I do, like horses change so much between 4 and 6. Those years there, a lot of people buy a very quiet 4-year-old that becomes a very volatile 5 or 6-year-old as they start to get strong and flex their muscles. So you have to be prepared to go through all of the changes that are quite normal. If you're used to dealing with young horses, you're used to these things happening. It doesn't mean anything's wrong. It just means that they, as I said, they are beginning to flex muscles, and they might test you a little bit more. But generally, when you know how it works, it's a smooth ride.
Okay, moving on from the young horses, we'll probably go back now to a part of your career. Don't know when that will be. Diane Adamson from Cheshire says, "Hi, Carl, and thank you very much for supporting the show," as we will echo here. If you could only ever ride one horse again, which horse would you choose and why? That's a hard question. You've had some amazing horses over the years, but if you could go back and choose one horse, who would it be and why?
Well, wow. I think probably, there's a lot of horses, certainly when you get to this stage in life, that you look back and think, if only I had known then what I know now. That's quite a normal thing to say. And I had this lovely horse that I rode, a great big horse called Democrat, Legal Democrat. And he was, again, a story that I'm sure people will find inspiring, because I was actually doing a competition, and the competition was for riders to send me a photograph of them on their horse, and I would look at all the photographs, and then I would decide who needed help, and they would have a course of lessons. Excuse me. So I got a photograph of this enormous horse. He was like 18 hands and solid, and there was a little lady on top who looked about 5'2". And I just laughed when I saw this picture. I went, well, she definitely needs help. So anyway, Marcia, who was the owner, came for some lessons, and Democrat was medium, advanced medium, and just beginning to get his flying changes. And he was so big, and Marcia was so small. And she had to try and get all of this power of this horse together. He was unknown breeding. He'd come off a boat from Holland. She bought him at a dealer's yard for £2,500. And Democrat, you know, we did this in a hilarious way, but for his career, because Marcia didn't really enjoy competing very much, but she loved schooling. So she would school him at home and then bring him down to me, and, you know, maybe for 2 days a month. And over the next 3 years, we got Democrat to Grand Prix. And I went to the European Championships on Democrat, the 2,500 unknown breeding, met Marcia, who became a friend through a competition in a magazine. But I never got to the bottom of him because I didn't know enough in those days. And that is a horse that got to Grand Prix. Yes, Marcia also, you know, like, will have loved the journey and was very much, you know, part of his schooling and bringing it down. And we traveled around Europe together doing competitions. And I thought that, you know, that's a good story to tell because, again, it's inspirational. It's sort of, you know, how could that possibly happen? You know, it just was an amazing horse. And if I'd had, you know, as I said, I think if I'd known what I know now, you know, he could have been even better. He still got to the top sort of 15 in Europe, but I think if I'd known more, you know, I would have been able to ride him a little bit better. So I would pick Democrat because he is one of my favourites from the past, and gave me new friendships as well with Marcia and the people we travelled with. So legal Democrat.
What's incredible to listen to is the fact that you've had so many horses that got to top level, but a number of those have not been the most expensive horses. A lot of it has come down to what we all know as blood, sweat and tears, and there's a lot of tears that go along this path, but you haven't had to mortgage your house and spend a lot of money on all of them.
No, and I mean, I make that point all the time. It is not about what you spend on the horse. It is about your investment in training, you know, that you have a system, that you can apply it, tweaking it, of course, to different types of horses, but you have your basic system that you can apply to training your horse, and then you will enjoy it. And as I said, you might get a horse that doesn't move at all when it's 4 years old. It might be a very normal mover. And if your training system is good, and the more you learn about collection and self-carriage, the freer and lighter and looser your horse will be able to move and get. So, yes, that is true. Keeping horses, training horses, it's expensive. We all know that. But if you can minimize the cost of, you know, don't think that you have to buy the most, you know, like amazing moving horse that you've ever seen because that's your ambition to get to the top. I mean, buy a very trainable horse. You know, I was brought up riding cobs, so, you know, and donkeys. That's what we had on Saab. I don't think I made any of them into Grand Prix horses, but I knew nothing then. But I mean, they were, you know, willing and able, and I just wonder, you know, nowadays, you know, people talk about, oh, my horse isn't good enough, and I'm like, I'm sure you might first of all get yourself a really good trainer who can help you with your system and everything, and see. Is it just that you don't understand how to train a horse, not your horse isn't good enough?
Yeah, systems are hugely important, as we know. Moving away from top level, it's something that we've all met along the road, a problem. Angela Bishop from the West Midlands asks, how would you work a horse that's developed a phobia to having other horses going anywhere near them? And especially, I think, in the warm-up area at a competition. She's been competing her X-race horse now for the last 5 years. It's something that we've all encountered at some points during our careers.
Yeah, it's a horrible feeling as well. You know, you can feel your horse when another one's coming towards it. And, you know, it can be dangerous. You know, you get boxed in, they turn around, run off. We've had 2 horses like that. And I did several things, basically. Well, first of all, you need to be able to ride in an arena with some thoughtful and helpful friends. You know, you don't want people riding at you and squashing you in. And I've had people come here who had horses with this problem, and I've said, come and ride with us. We'll start with one in the school with you, then we'll start with two, then we'll start with three. We all stay on the same rein. We all walk around together. We put the horse in between us. We walk around together. So it gets used to things like, but in walk, so it's not terrified. And bit by bit, you know, we just, and then I will, for instance, if I had that horse coming towards me, I would come down to walk and let her trot past me, because obviously the faster someone goes at your horse like that, the more terrified it gets. So it is just, I think, instead of going to a competition where you can't fix this problem, because you can't say to people, you have to be on the same rein as me, or, you know, you don't canter anywhere near me, you can't do that. So you also, I mean, the obvious place to go is actually ring up a riding school and say, would you mind if I join in into one of your lessons, and I'll just tag along at the back and ride my horse, you know, with a very basic riding lesson. Let's say you've got walk and trot people, and, you know, maybe you're able to go in there and hang around at the back and just get used to the horses like that. And the other thing that I did, we have a 6-year-old at the moment. He's just become 6-year-old champion this year. Very nervous of other horses. I turned him out with 2 others and put them in the field together. So the 3 of them live out. And now he's got so used to galloping around with them and everything. I mean, in the beginning, it was hilarious. He was tiptoeing around the fence, like hoping no one would notice him. And of course, horses being social were like, come here, you're going to be our friend. And now they still live out, the 3 of them still live out together. And he's got over it because he's with horses all the time. So just a couple of things I can think of that might help.
It is a hard one. It's a hard one to get over as well. But as you say, it's small steps, and it's just getting that confidence up. I know you're a busy man. You've got lots to do, and I know you've got teaching to come up this afternoon. One final question, and it comes from Pippa in Buckinghamshire. There have been so many questions, and Carl, I know you took the time to look through them and pick some of your favourites. One question that we'll finish up with is, away from the horses, what is your favourite tipple? Alcoholic tipple.
Well, that's very easy. It's not very expensive either, you'll be pleased to know. I'm actually not a spirit drinker, really. I just like my white wine, Spanish. It's called Vino Sol. It's been in my system for about 20 years. And it's my petrol. Yeah, I literally, you know, there's no good giving me expensive wines because I just put ice in everything. So, you know, when I go to somebody's house, I always take a bottle of cheap wine and I say, I'll have that, because I'm too embarrassed if somebody had an amazing bottle of wine to then say, could I have some ice to put in there, please? So, yeah, I stick to my Vinasol Spanish, good old Spanish plonk. And it's kept me going for the last 25 years. So I recommend that as well.
Certainly has. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you for Your Horse Virtually Live. Is there any last bit of advice you would give to anybody just before we sign off?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, and I hope we can all meet again in better times when we can all actually do this live. You know, I would just reiterate again now, you know, like, just get yourself a good training system, buy what you can afford. You would still be able to train that. And the best investment, of course, is surround yourself by people that are going to be positive and help you to be able to achieve that. And not every horse is going to be a superstar, but the next one might be. So that's well possible.
Well, wise words indeed from Carl Hester. Carl, thank you very much. We hope you've enjoyed the show here today. From us all here at the Your Horse Virtually Live team, goodbye. And we hope to see you, as Carl said, in better times next year.
Bye-bye.